The chandelier above Victoria Sterling's poker table burned like a low sun, throwing honeyed light across the mahogany and the tidy cities of chips. Polished leather sighed when anyone shifted. The room smelled of oak oil, rye, and a well-kept secret. Marcus Washington stood half a step behind his son's chair and tried to look like furniture. His collar trapped heat. A bead of sweat began its slow travel beneath the starched edge. He had stood behind wealth for years and learned the art of stillness, the way to keep his breath quiet enough not to disturb anyone's reflection of themselves. Tonight the reflection included his 12-year-old, small at the table but upright, hands folded, eyes steady. Victoria leaned back with a predator's ease, her diamond necklace catching the chandelier in a hard, white blink. She let her gaze rest on Jamal, then on Marcus, the way a landowner might check a boundary. "I invited your son to watch," she said, "not to babysit at 10,000 a seat." Marcus kept his voice even. "He wanted to come, ma'am. He's been studying." Her smile curved in approval of its own wit. "Studying. Adorable. I've played senators and CEOs for 20 years. They study too." Jamal's eyes never left the dealer's hands. "Poker is 52.3% skill," he said softly. 47.7 luck. Then he lifted his gaze, polite and unblinking. "The question isn't what I know, ma'am. It's whether you're ready to find out." Laughter arrived late and died early. Gerald, a hedge fund regular, coughed to make the moment casual. Thomas, venture capitalist, adjusted his cufflink because it gave his fingers somewhere to go. Constance, diamonds on both wrists, tasted her drink with the consideration of a judge. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Deal him in." The dealer hesitated, because dealers know the difference between fun and sport, and then began to pitch the cards, 2 for each player, soft as breath. Marcus heard everything louder than it was. The hum of the vent, the minute tinkle of ice cracking in a cut glass lowball, the slow beat in his ears. Jamal rested 2 fingers on his cards, lifted, blinked once, and set them down again like a decision. House rules. Marcus knew, no mercy for math. He had heard Victoria say something like it before. She didn't bother tonight. She lifted her glass instead. The diamond at her throat flashed once and went still. And now the thing the room did not know, the thing Marcus needed the room never to know, yet that belonged to him and to Jamal and to the hours no one else saw. 2 months ago, Jamal had asked if he could try something. Marcus had come home late and found the boy at the kitchen table with a notebook, a library copy of a statistics text, and a cheap deck fanned face down. The boy had drawn trees and arrows and written numbers that multiplied across the page. The next week, Jamal had downloaded free solver outputs from a forum and started to memorize ranges like other kids memorized rosters. He watched tournament replays at half speed and paused to say why a bet was too small, why a call was priced in. He practiced reading tells on silent videos, pose length, blink rate, swallow timing. He asked Marcus to deal mock hands until midnight, to announce the board aloud, so he could calculate outs without looking down. And he corrected Marcus's counting when fatigue tangled it. He learned ICM the way a pianist learns scales. He timed himself for decisions and wrote his averages on sticky notes. He didn't call it training. He called it get ready. Victoria didn't know any of that. None of them did. That was the audience's secret now. The boy had prepared like a professional for a game adults called play. Gerald opened for 50, with the cheer of a man who enjoys the first swing. Thomas said call like the word belonged to him. Constance folded theatrically, all velvet regret. Victoria raised to 200 with the economy of someone paying a parking meter Their faces shifted toward the child at the end of the current. Jamal considered. His thumb traced the corrugated edge of a chip. He wasn't measuring money. He was putting his fingers around a number he already knew. "Call," he said. Marcus's jaw tightened. He watched the dealer's hands, the practiced snap of the burn, the clean fan of 3 cards, because he could not watch his son's face without showing everything in his own. King of hearts, 7 of diamonds, 2 of clubs, rainbow. Clean, a board with room to pretend. Gerald put 100 out, smiling as if he were tipping a valet. Thomas bowed out. Victoria cut through the table with 200 more. She didn't look at Marcus. She looked at Jamal the way a cat looks at a shadow. Jamal didn't look at his cards again. He watched her. He watched the necklace stay still, watched the breath settle under the silk at her collarbone, watched the right foot that hadn't moved since she sat. "You raised to buy," he said, "not to protect." It wasn't showmanship. It was a lab note spoken aloud. Gerald laughed too loudly because the joke might be that there was no joke. Victoria's smile thinned to show the mathematics of teeth. "I call," Jamal said. Marcus told his fingers to ease their grip on the chair back, but they didn't obey. Rent made a number in his mind, and then another number. Food, medicine, school, and then Jamal's birthday became a number, because numbers are obedient, even when life is not. The dealer burned and turned the ace of spades. Marcus heard a small collective inhale, like a tide turning in the lungs around the table. Victoria did not flinch. She built 5 black chips into a column and set them down like a signature. "Out," Thomas said from somewhere above his loosened tie. "Same," Gerald muttered, and the pot's edge drew smooth around Jamal and Victoria. "All in," Jamal said, "for everything I have." The words didn't sound like risk. They sounded like an answer to an equation. "You can't cover 500, Victoria said, voice flat, as a blade laid on a cloth. "Then, that's my all-in," Jamal said. "You can pay to see." Marcus watched the way the diamond caught the chandelier and made a brief, bright wound in the air. Victoria pushed the chips forward without looking at them. "I pay." She showed king-queen suited, strength tidy as a ledger. Jamal turned over A7 offsuit, which in this exact weather and at this exact time made 2 pair that outranked hers. The river card was a 4 that mattered to no one. "Beginner's luck," Victoria said, as if naming the wind would make it stop. "Not luck," Jamal said. "Math." Marcus felt the weight leave his lungs and drop to his knees. He didn't let it become a sound. Jamal gathered the chips with both hands. Small motions, gentle, like he was collecting marbles after a game that hadn't angered anyone. The sound was a tidy rain. No one liked the math in the air now. It changed the shape of things. "Continue," Victoria asked the room and then herself. She drank. The cut glass whispered against her teeth. Jamal looked back. A quick check-in, the way they'd agreed. Marcus gave him the nod he saved for moments, when a father stands at the edge of the world and pretends to know the map. The next hand came. The light found each card and made it shine like a small lie. The money in Marcus's pocket didn't exist next to the money on the table. That was a trick rich rooms played. They made other money look invisible. He told himself to watch the card, but his eyes went to Jamal's eyes, because that had always been the truest table in his life. He knew that look. The boy was not guessing. He was reading, and not the way people mean when they say that word softly. He was reading the way a scientist reads a meter. Numbers, trend, error bars, prediction. 50. Gerald sang again, because a song can pretend nothing has changed. "Call," said Thomas, "because habit is the muscle that speaks most often." 200, said Victoria, "because gravity argues with no one." Jamal folded. It was nothing. Then another hand, and he folded again. The restraint tightened the room like a belt. He wasn't here to prove he would fight every time. He was here to fight when the math said fight. Constance smiled at him with a softness that had something sharp under it. "It's okay to be unsure, sweetie," she said. "We all start somewhere." Jamal met her eyes with the small courtesy men learn late, and boys like him learn early. "Then I'm in the right place," he said. The dealer's hands made small weather across the felt. Cards breathed. Chips sledded. Marcus's collar loosened with a slight tug of 2 fingers, because if he had to stand inside this weather any longer without air, he would have to cough, and that would become a record of himself. He did not want in anyone else's head. It went like this for 3 hands. Jamal not playing weak hands because he did not believe in gifts he hadn't ordered. Victoria pressing small edges because she believed in pressure. Gerald telling small jokes to keep the room in his mouth. The chandelier hummed like a power line. The vent sighed. Somewhere down the hall, a refrigerator made the contented click of a closed door. On the 4th hand of that stretch, Jamal did not fold. He didn't look thrilled. He looked like a person who had just found the correct page. "100th," he said, and the chip stack moved like a sentence you could read from across the room. Everyone called because pride has a way of getting up from its chair. The flop came Jack of clubs, 10 of clubs, 9 of hearts. Marcus knew just enough to know he didn't know what it meant, except that it looked like a street with many corners. 200, Jamal said, and the number didn't match a boy's voice. It matched something older, something trained. Gerald folded quickly. Thomas followed in a hurry. Constance's mouth opened, then closed, then smiled at her choice to be cautious. Only Victoria stayed, and her eyes narrowed not from fear, Marcus thought, but from a particular kind of interest, the interest of someone who recognizes a puzzle that has been misshelved, as if it belonged in a different library. "You're confident," she said, the diamond a white star that did not move. "How strong?" "Strong enough," Jamal said. The turn was the queen of clubs, which made hearts beat faster in everyone who could count. Flushes arrived. Straights gathered weight. Jamal didn't change expression. 500, he said. The 5 sounded like a door closing somewhere you could not see. Victoria paused. Her heel made a small double tap against the rung of her chair, and the sound died immediately under the carpeted floor. The diamond did not move. She pushed her cards forward to the dealer with a delicacy that looked like refusal to touch something contagious. "Fold," she said. Jamal took the pot without showing. He didn't reach for more than was there. He didn't look to anyone for approval. He stacked his chips into a new geometry and looked down to check nothing had rolled away. "What did you have?" Victoria asked. The tone wasn't playful. It was a test of jurisdiction. "You folded." "Ma'am," Jamal said. "You have to pay to see." Marcus watched the sentence land. It didn't clang. It didn't provoke. It just lay on the table like a rule engraved long before tonight. Thomas nodded without meaning to. Gerald blew out a short breath in something like surprise. Constance smiled around her glass and decided to save her sympathy for later. If later offered a stage, the room shifted a few degrees cooler. Politeness doesn't change temperature. Power does. There are rooms where children are ornaments and rooms where they are trouble. This had just become the second kind. Victoria lifted her glass, drank, and set it down neatly on the same ring it had left in the coaster. She stared at the cards, not on the table, at the space where they might have been if money had been spent to make them visible. "Boring," she said, almost to herself, and Marcus thought of how dangerous a bored animal is. "Small stakes bore me." Jamal examined the neat circle of water the glass had made, and then looked up, and Marcus saw the smallest spark of humor in him, because sometimes the world telegraphs itself in water rings and diamond ticks and little double taps of a heel. "If you're ready to read it." He was ready. Marcus had watched him get ready in a kitchen that smelled like lemon dish soap and pencil dust. The boy had not learned arrogance there. He had learned preparation. He had learned patience. He had learned to make numbers into decisions, and to make decisions into acts that did not need applause. Victoria turned her attention back to him, sharp and newly awake. "Let's make it interesting," she said to the room's air more than to the boy. "But first, we continue." She flicked her fingers at the dealer, a gesture that looked like permission disguised as generosity. The next hand started its soft, inevitable journey across. Felt Jamal's hands returned to their quiet place on the rail. Marcus flexed his fingers once, let them rest again on the chair, and thought of the one thing he knew for certain, now that the audience knew it too. This was not a child stumbling into a game. This was a prepared mind, moving through a map only he could see, and somewhere ahead, a line would be crossed where preparation becomes consequence. "Just for fun," Victoria murmured, smiling as if the words had a taste. Right. The diamond at her throat caught a final white shard from the chandelier and went still. Glasses ticked, chips chattered. The chandelier's low hum filled the space left by the first hand. Marcus steadied his breathing behind his son's chair. 2 months of training, Zolver outputs, ICM drills, late-night tell practice, had funneled into this room. Only he knew it. Victoria's eyes sharpened a notch, her smile thinning. "Deal," she said. Cards skated across felt. Soft, even, inevitable. Jamal set 2 fingers on his hand, lifted, blinked once, replaced. No flourish. Gerald opened for 50, cheerful out of habit. Thomas called. The movement automatic. Constance performed a sympathetic fold. Victoria, without looking at anyone, made it 200. Jamal pushed his cards back. A small, painless fold. Marcus let the thought land. Good. Discipline first. He kept his hands loose on the chair back. His knuckles still hummed from the last pot. Tiny hooks for the next beat tugged him anyway. Rent, meds, school, like a cash register chirping tick, tick, tick. He looked at his boy's profile and let the numbers go quiet. 3 more hands walked past. Jamal refused thin spots with a calmness that made the room itch. He didn't come to play every hand. He came to play the right ones. Gerald filled the silence with small jokes. Thomas checked his mutely glowing phone. Constance let bracelets comment for her. Victoria's heel tapped twice on the chair, rung dry, skeletal, almost swallowed by the carpet. Marcus heard it. The double tap. Bluff, oxygen. The necklace still. Strength holds its breath. New kids tightening up, Gerald chirped. Got scared. Negative expected value, Jamal said, not looking up. Fold is optimal. Gerald laughed, too loud and too late. Victoria's mouth smiled, her eyes memorized. The dealer's hands made a neat blizzard. Cards landed. The room held. Jamal cut a clean stack forward. 100. Everyone came along. Pride and curiosity make cheap company. Flop, 8 of hearts, 6 of hearts, 2 of spades, 200, Jamal said, not as a dare but as a measurement. Constance's concern folded itself. Thomas stuck around, a man saying yes for once. Gerald bumped to 4, a little kick at the hive. Trap, our air, Marcus thought. Jamal took 2 slow seconds. The kitchen timer cadence he'd drilled and added 2 blacks. Call. The turn. A 3 of hearts. Flush on the table like spilled silk. 5. Gerald blurted. Too fast. Fear trying on confidence. Victoria watched. Unentered. Her attention a version of touch. Jamal counted. Not the chips. The price. He raised not to the ceiling but to the number that turned, calling into a punishment. 11. Gerald looked at Jamal. Then, briefly, at Marcus, as if fatherhood might translate genius. Marcus gave him blank professionalism. A beat later, Gerald folded with a flourish that asked to be admired. Jamal gathered, without showing. He made new geometry of his chips. Calm, precise, 12 years old and complete. Sweet child, Constance murmured. Sugar now gritty. Thomas, pretending not to, scrawled blink rate preflop on a napkin beneath his phone. He would never use it. The writing made him feel awake. Marcus tried a full inhale. Air felt rented. The rye's edge cut through the polish. The leather's warmth rose. The chandelier hummed. He kept his breath from becoming evidence. 2 hands later, fold. Then a small, blind steel. Pressure applied with tweezers. Then a hand that braided past and present. Jamal opened. Gravity called everyone. Flop. King of spades. 7 of hearts. 2 of clubs. A cousin to the earlier board. Victoria checked. Boredom staged. Gerald stabbed. Thomas left like a gentleman. Jamal called and looked at Victoria as if offering clarity. Turn. Ace of spades. The exact shape of before. 5. Victoria said with ceremony. A ritual trying to summon yesterday. Jamal breathed and went all in. Not a 1-2-year-old's dare. A statistician's answer? Everything. Gerald folded gratefully. Victoria looked at the pot, then at the boy, then, fleetingly, at her reflection in the lacquered wood. She paid. King, queen. Jamal showed ace 7. River blank. Prepared lucky. Lucky night, she said. Anyway, prepared night. Jamal replied. The voice almost lost to the chandelier. The room resorted its faces. Gerald's sip grew. Constance appraised. Thomas cupped his phone, camera lens asleep, but thinking. Marcus filed that under later headache and returned to now. Shuffle. Bridge. Whisper of felt. Jamal won a small semi-bluff. No one clocked. Victoria took back one with top 2 and a smile that sold normal restored. Another quiet orbit. The boy's gravity held. Pizza. Gerald asked the ceiling, marking time. Didn't we promise pizza for the child? We promised nothing. Victoria said, sharper than she meant. Then, without looking away from Jamal, Chef can send something. I'm fine. Thank you, Jamal said. The courtesy landed. It always did. Marcus felt the old rib ache, the one that came when his son remembered to stack cups at a fast food bin, or held a door for someone who wouldn't meet his eyes. He let the ache stay. Some pains are honest currency. The next deal arrived like a forecast you could trust. Jamal took his breath, lifted corners, set them down. He didn't look to Marcus this time. He looked through Victoria. 100. All but Constance came along. Flop. Jack of clubs. 10 of clubs. 9 of hearts. Too many corners. Jamal's chips walked out 2 squares. 200. Gerald folded as if saving himself from himself. Thomas followed. Group. Courage. Only Victoria remained. You're betting like a 12-year-old who read a library, she said, smiling stitched on. How strong? Strong enough. Turn. Queen of clubs. Clubs bloomed. Straights lined up. Jamal didn't adjust anything but the bet. 500. A wedge. Under the pot. Victoria stared until the stare lost money. Fold. Jamal drew the pot in. Shut the drawer on information. What did you have? She asked, like curiosity owed no toll. You folded, he said. Gentle. Information costs. Silence organized itself. Not empty. Busy. The room recalculated who it had become. Victoria finished her rye and called for another with 2-finger punctuation. The glass came back sweating. A second ring overlapping the first. A little Venn diagram of pride and patience. How much do you have? She asked. turning to Jamal with full attention at last. He counted without touching. Abu 1200, 1250. Good, she said. Let's make it interesting. Marcus's spine registered the torque first. He felt the chair screw, perfect metal, cool, exact. Under his fingertips, he slid his eyes to Jamal's face. Stillness. Yes. Underneath it, a light waking. But Victoria held the escalation a beat away. Next hand first, she said. Then we'll talk. The cards flew. Jamal took his breath and raised. Careful and clean. 200. Thomas coughed. Gerald shifted. Constance watched the chandelier's rain of light instead of the felt. Victoria smiled. Not teeth, and sat the beat. Marcus smelled rye, polish, leather, the ozone of chilled air. He heard the dry tick of a heel somewhere under cloth, and the finer trickle of condensation slipping off a decanter's lip. The diamond at Victoria's throat stayed still. He's not folding. Marcus knew, and she's about to raise the world. The world lifted sooner than expected. Stop, Victoria told the dealer. She turned her glass an inch on the coaster, aligning ring with ring like a builder sighting a plumb line. Heads up. After this hand, she flicked 2 black chips toward Jamal as if tossing a treat to a calm dog. Part test, part insult, part admiration. You keep playing like that. We should remove the noise. Noise, Gerald said, cheerful, threatened. The peanut gallery, she said, and didn't look away from Jamal. But first, finish. Play resumed. Jamal's raise held. The others folded like paper fans. The pot was small but spoke in full sentences. I will take what's priced in. I will not chase what's priced out. When the dealer pushed the chips to Jamal, Victoria set her glass down. The clink, a gavel. All right, she said. Let's have our little lesson. Marcus felt the air change, the way rooms do before summer storms and verdicts. He placed his palm on the chair back, the leather warm from Jamal's shoulders. Stay present. Measure, breathe in 4, out 6. He'd learned that in a hospital waiting room, the body understood it anywhere, but the lesson would not start yet. Victoria had a different lever to pull. Not now, she murmured, letting the hook sink before the line tugged. Give him one more orbit. One more orbit gave Jamal a small pot, Victoria another. It gave Gerald a story to tell at breakfast, and Constance a reason to text someone under the table. The driver's kid is not a kid. Thomas rearranged his face into neutrality and practiced the angle of his phone at knee level. Marcus watched the red diode flicker at the far credenza. Camera. Live. A patient little eye. Echo seeds fell into the carpet. Blink. Heel tap. Diamond stillness. A timestamp on a silent recording. Then the glass went down again. Now, Victoria said, "Ma'am." Marcus started, useless and sincere in the same breath. He closed the mouth he'd opened. Calm, Marcus, she said without turning. No one's threatening your child. We're elevating him. That's not how elevation works. He thought, elevation isn't an offer made by a cliff. He said nothing. The room would hear tone, even if the words were perfect. She laid out terms like contracts, heads up, blinds, 50100. Play until one stack swallowed the other. You have 1250, she said to Jamal. I'll stake you the difference to 5. If you win, you keep everything. If you lose, you owe me nothing. The generosity had teeth. Marcus looked down at Jamal. The boy met his eyes, the check-in made larger by stakes. Ask me to say no. Marcus begged. Let me be the villain who saves you. Jamal didn't look away. Dad, he said quietly, but not quietly enough to be missed. She won't stop. Not after this. He didn't add she'll hunt. He didn't need to. If I walk, she'll chase. If I win, she'll respect the boundary. And if you lose, the question rose like smoke in Marcus. He tried to blow it away without moving. "Fold if it's bad," Marcus said, his voice a strand of wire. "Promise me." "I promise." They returned to the table. The world narrowed. Wood. Felt. Chips. The hum that never turned off. Victoria's smile rediscovered its knife. She shuffled herself, cards whispering authority, and nodded to the dealer to sit out. A small ritual of control. Marcus noted it, and sent the note into the file cabinet at the back of his head. Later. If there was a later, this would matter or not matter. Either way, it would be there, labeled. The first heads-up hand, Jamal peeked and folded. Victoria murmured. Smart, like awarding a sticker for not running. Second hand, small pot to Victoria. Third, Jamal nibbling back. Fourth, nothing. Fifth, nothing made interesting by the absence of error. Marcus could stand a century if the boy didn't make a mistake. He could not stand 1 second of regret. Mini hooks pulled at the edges of his patience. Does he spot her cadence changes? Does she notice his timing? He answered himself. He drilled timing. He practiced on silence. He had watched Jamal time the length of a swallow, the pause before a bet, the unnecessary glance at cards. He had been the metronome, and the crowd and the camera, then a hand that took the room's temperature and raised it. Jamal raised pre-flop. Victoria called, her smile narrower. Flop, Queen of Hearts, Jack of Hearts, 3 of Diamonds, draws everywhere. Jamal bet. Victoria raised big, almost theatrical. The line said, "I'm ahead," or "I want you to think I am." Marcus tracked her left heel. No tap. He tracked the necklace. Still. He tracked the throat. 1 fast beat. Then baseline. Strong. But how strong? Jamal called. The price correct. Turn. 10 of Hearts. The nuts bloom. Jamal checked. Victoria shoved almost all the way through. Pressure. Not panits. Jamal waited a beat. The beat he'd trained. Not the one adrenaline suggested. All in. He said, "Quiet." The calculation crossed Victoria's face like weather over water. For a moment, Marcus saw something that wasn't rage or contempt. Respect. The kind earned against will. She paid. Jamal showed Ace-King of Hearts. She showed 2 pair, crushed by river irrelevance. Jamal stacked the win without glee. The chandelier applauded in light. Gerald exhaled a whistle and then converted it into a laugh. Constance held her glass without drinking. Thomas finally recorded something, lens catching the gentle exactness of a child raking chips as if each were a fragile coin. Beginner's luck. Victoria tried one more time, as if repetition could conjure truth. Variance. Jamal corrected softly. Not luck. The heads-up rhythm stabilized. Jamal tightened when she bullied, pressed when she retreated. He used her story about herself against her. I dominate. He chose spots where domination loses money. Mini payoff after mini payoff. The stack moved his way a chip at a time. Marcus's thoughts shortened to useful length. Watch necklace. Heel quiet. Eyes red. Breathe. The cash register inside him kept its steady tick, tick, but he lowered the volume. Every so often, Jamal's head tilted half a degree, the signal they'd never named. I'm okay. Stay steady. Victoria tried chaos. Odbet shizes. Out of position firework. Jamal didn't chase answers. He sold her a story of his own. Nervous child. Too price sensitive. Then punished the first call she priced wrong. Time loosened and tightened again. Somewhere, the kitchen door swung on its silent hinge. Somewhere, a service elevator, Sahil. The diamond remained a star pinned to a sky that didn't move. Enough, Victoria said after a stretch where nothing and everything happened. She put a new glass down decisively. Double or... She stopped herself, blinked, adjusted. No, not yet. The dealer, retired but attentive, licked a thumb he didn't need. Marcus realized his own mouth was dry. He let his tongue find moisture, then swallowed. He had not moved his feet in an hour. Then a hand that looked small from far away and enormous up close. Jamal raised. Victoria, 3-bet. Jamal called, flop. King of diamonds, 9 of spades, 2 of diamond. Victoria c-bet big. Jamal called small, turn, 4 of diamonds. The front door of a flush opened. Jamal checked. Victoria overbet the turn. Numbers that announced a story no solver loved. Overreach, or a dare. He sees it, Marcus told himself. He sees the weight mismatch. Jamal, after the timers beat, shoved the rest. Victoria's hail ticked 1 to 2. The first audible Marcus had heard since the heads-up began. She stared at the board, then at Jamal, then at the diamond that had refused to move for an hour. This time, the stone seemed heavier. Fold, she said, and let it go. Jamal didn't show. He never did when the information cost more than the pot paid. The room's silence got a new density. The dignities inside it rearranged their chairs. Marcus rolled his shoulders once, microscopic, and let the ache live there instead of in his jaw. Hold. Son, hold the line. He looked at the red diode on the credenza again. Still blinking. Echo secured. A timestamp waiting to be asked for if anyone later doubted what happened here. Victoria glanced across the table, not through Jamal but at him. You're very good, she said in the tone of someone admitting a fact without surrendering to it. Thank you, Jamal said, and meant it. She shifted her glass, aligning ring to ring again, as if the circles could be made to overlap into sense. All right, she said. Let's make it interesting. Marcus felt the room lean with the words. Along the far wall, the shadows stepped back to watch. Jamal's eyes brightened a fraction. Here it comes, Marcus thought. Pulse, finding the vent's soft drone, the cliff pretending to be a bridge. The promise in her voice made the whole room lean, not louder, only sharper. Jamal's eyes quickened by a fraction, the way they did when a problem revealed a hidden door. Let us make it interesting, Victoria said, aligning her glass, so the wet ring kissed the earlier ring. 2 perfect circles, touching like an oath. State the terms. Jamal answered, courteous and steady. 5,000 each. Winner takes all, she said. I will stake you for the rest. If you lose, you owe me nothing. Generosity with polished teeth. Take a minute, Marcus said, his voice a thin wire. He was trying not to snap. He and Jamal stepped back 2 paces. Leather smell softened, felt lost half its magnet. You do not have to do this, Marcus murmured. You have already shown them. She will not stop, Jamal said. If I walk, she hunts. If I win, she understands the boundary. I will fold if it is bad. I promise. Say it again, Marcus said. I fold if it is bad. I promise. The promise sat between them like a signed page. It would have to be enough. They returned. Victoria broke the deck herself. Control dressed as courtesy, and nodded for the dealer to sit out. Heads up now. The room learned a new posture. Small blind and big blind, spoken like 2 drum tap. The rhythm tightened. First hand. Jamal peeked and let it go. Smart. Victoria purred, awarding a gold star for restraint. Second hand. A small pot to her. Third. Jamal took back a sliver without bleeding. 2 more hands traded like quiet nods. Marcus could stand a century of this. He thought, no errors, no heroics, only math. He could not stand 1 second of regret. Many hooks tugged anyway. Does he see her cadence change? Does she see his timing settle? He answered himself. He drilled timing. Marcus could still hear the kitchen timer on their little table at home, the plastic buttons worn smooth. Jamal whispering 2 count, decide. While the seconds blinked like patient eyes. He had recorded those drills on his phone. The clip sat in his gallery with a date and an hour and a minute. Echo 2 already lived in his pocket. Proof beyond memory. Raise, Jamal said, stacks, clicking like careful punctuation. 200, he added, the weight exact. Call, she said, her tone a glass surface. Flop came down a queen, a jack, and a small diamond. Draws under the felt like hidden rebar. 400, she said, big enough to tell a story. Left heel keyet. Necklace still. One fast swallow. Then baseline, strong, but how strong? Jamal called. The price correct. Turn card brought a 10 of hearts that tied the whole story into a perfect strand. Jamal checked. Victoria drove a near pot across the felt. Pressure not panic. All in, Jamal said after his kitchen timer beat, not the beat adrenaline loves. The room did not breathe. The chandelier seemed to hum, and then hold its breath with them. The calculation moved across Victoria's face like a cloud shadow over water. Respect surfaced for a breath, earned against will. She paid. Jamal turned over a suited ace and king in hearts, and she showed 2 pair made of queen and jack. A hand beautiful in the wrong weather. The river meant nothing. Chips slid to Jamal like tidy rain. Variance, Jamal murmured when she tried to call it luck. Not unkind, only precise. Gerald let out a whistle and turned it into a laugh. Constance held her glass without drinking. Thomas raised his phone from his knee. With the discretion of the well-practiced, a tiny beep, almost imagined, and the red dot blinked to life. The face of the table reflected that dot like a small wound of light. In the corner of his screen, a string of time in white numbers ticked forward. 21, 18, and 36. In words, if you bothered to translate, Echo 2 clicked shut in plain sight. Proof laid itself down on polished wood. Within reach of anyone who might later ask, the rhythm settled. When she bullied, Jamal tightened. When she retreated, he pressed exactly until calling hurt more than folding. He sold her a story, nervous child, 2, price sensitive, and then taxed. The first time she mispriced him. Small pots passed like clean receipts. He never thumbed a chip for show. He never reached for a glass he did not need. He let the room invent the adjectives while he wrote the arithmetic. Marcus shortened his thoughts to keep them useful. Necklace still. Heel quiet. Eyes red. Breathe. The cash register that lived in his head kept chirping rent and medicine and school, but lower now, like a machine in the next room. He put one hand on the back of the chair, leather warmed by his son's shoulders, and let that warmth be a tether. Then a hand that looked small from far away and enormous up close. Jamal raised. Victoria 3 bet with a number meant to move furniture. Jamal called with a posture that said, interested, not committed. The flop came a king. Nina. A small diamond. She fired too large. Jamal called small. A line that said, price me fairly. Turn brought another diamond, opening the front door to something wet and dangerous. Jamal checked. Victoria overbet. The weight a little wrong for the story. Overreach. Marcus thought, she is trying to price a fold like fear. Jamal waited his exact beat and shoved the rest. That tiny heel tick, the first audible tell since heads up began. Eyes from board to boy to the diamond at her throat, which suddenly looked heavier than pretty. She looked at the twin water rings under her glass and chose a truth. Fold, she said, and let it go. Jamal did not show. Information still cost. Respect is mostly a silence that rearranges furniture. The air cooled by a degree. The chandelier hummed the same, which sounded louder now. Somewhere. As service elevator Sahil. Somewhere. The kitchen door breathed. The red diode on the credenza kept blinking like a patient heartbeat. Very good, Victoria said, admitting a fact without surrendering to it. Thank you, Jamal answered. Again, she said, and set her glass down so the ring met the earlier ring perfectly, a gavel soft as a bell. 2 hands later, Jamal bled nothing, took a slice, left no prints. She tried chaos, odbet sizes, quick moves, stutters. He did not chase her shadows. He let them lengthen, then sold her back the light. Marcus watched for the tell pattern. He knew like the rattle in a tired belt. The necklace stayed still in true strength. The heel ticked in false bravado. The micro swallow lagged by a blink in those in-between lies. He kept his breath on a count he learned in a bright waiting room on a bad night. In for a steady 4, out for 6, like a man folding paper boats and floating them one by one. Enough, she said, not louder, only flatter. She rotated the glass so the rings overlapped again. 2 circles pretending to be 1, time to settle something. The next hand began before the sentence quite ended. Because settlements live in procedure. Jamal raised small. Victoria called with a speed that announced a plan. The flop paired the board and added a club for tension. Jamal checked. She checked behind, hoarding information. Turn grew the club story. Jamal bet 1/3, a number that could be strength or air. She raised to the very edge of comfortable. Marcus held still and listened with his eyes. No hail tick, necklace still. There, a teeny late swallow. A thread dropped at the hem. Hamal called, not chasing, pricing the river. River brought a 4th club on the board, the kind of card that makes honesty expensive. Jamal let the silence stretch until it sang, then slid a bet across that turned, calling into a mistake for most of the hands that felt right. 800, he said, voice even. She counted pride, and pot, and stacks, and stories, and called because folding would mean the child wrote the ending. He showed 1 high club and nothing else that mattered. Flush by construction, value by price. Her cards died face down. The dealer's hand a small funeral. That was the tilt. Not rage. Mathematics. She watched her stack shrink in clean increments and discovered that control does not argue when the numbers leave. A few more pots, careful and narrow, and the end walked in like a plane arriving on time. Jamal caught a bluff with 2nd pair when the heel ticked again. He 3-bet light when her timing went showy. He folded exactly when the diamond at her throat finally shifted on a breath that told the truth about strength. Then the hand that finished it without fireworks. Jamal raised. Victoria called too quickly, speed betraying predecision. The flop came with a 10 and a 9 and a little spade. She led fast. Jamal called calm. The turn paired the 10, slowing certain stories and accelerating others. She bet big enough to sell, not big enough to hide. Jamal called again, letting her author the last paragraph. The river brought a 3rd spade. Jamal checked and laid the rope. All in, she said, pushing the last neat wall. For a heartbeat, the room made no sound at all. Even the chandelier seemed to hold itself still. Marcus felt his own blood in his ears, a soft drum under the silence. He could not see Jamal's cards from his angle. He watched his son's breathing. Even, he heard the ghost of the kitchen timer in this impossible room. 2 count, decide. I call, Jamal said, and turned trips with a king kicker. No spade required. She showed a pair beneath and a story that overspent. The dealer counted the quiet arithmetic to 0 on her side. Game, the dealer said, as if naming a weather front. Silence. Then Gerald's small, shocked laugh. Constance. Good God, no sugar now. Thomas's phone caught the exact moment the wall of chips left one side and made a new skyline in front of a 12-year-old. The red dot kept blinking. The little time numbers kept marching. Echo 2 glowed as plain as glass. Jamal did not fist pump. He did not grin. He stacked with the same careful hands he used to line up his school notebooks. He aligned the edges like he was settling books on a shelf in an orderly house. Marcus let his breath go. It took with it something that had been wound tight since the driveway. Pride and fear unwound the same rope and left it on the floor. He touched the back of Jamal's chair once, a blessing he did not know how to perform, then put his hand away before it became a scene. Victoria stared at the remainder of her stack. The diamond at her throat finally moved, not a tell, a tremor. Her mouth found a line that was not a smile and not surrender. Wounded pride has many faces. This one looked almost human. "Well," she said, and cut the word clean of its old edge. "Congratulations." She swallowed the word beginner halfway through and put it down to sleep. "Thank you," Jamal said, and looked to Marcus, not for permission, for orientation. Where next? Where next arrived in the oldest language on earth. "Another game," Victoria said, the blade newly bright in her tone. "Double or nothing." "Victoria," Constance warned. "Enough. I said another game." Her eyes never left Jamal. 20,000. My 22 is 10. Best of 50 hands. Let us see if he can actually play. Marcus stepped because fathers step. "Mom," he began. "Marcus," she said without turning. "This is not a threat. It is an opportunity. A cliff dressed as a bridge again." He swallowed the sentence and tried again. "We will discuss." He touched Jamal's shoulder. "A minute." They stepped away. "Not far. Enough to borrow air. We can leave winners." Marcus said, "We can go home and let this be enough." "If we leave now," Jamal said, "she tells the story that I ran. She hunts anyway. Better to end it while the math is honest. And if I lose, we are where we were this morning. You say it to me all the time. Money is not the dignity." Marcus tasted iron and realized he had bitten his cheek. He let out a short laugh. "I do say that." "Let me finish," Jamal said. "I will fold if it is bad." "Promise," Marcus said, "because some words have to be said in full." "I promise." They returned. Gerald poured like a man anchoring history with ritual. Thomas checked his battery. Constance pressed her lips into a neutral country. Victoria signaled the dealer back in. Procedure resumed. Stacks were refreshed to the new numbers. Her 20 to his 10. A ledger, clean and waiting. Marcus looked at the little camera diode on the credenza. It blinked on, steady as a metronome. He glanced at the wall clock, noted the hour and the minute, and the red corner of the cut card. He filed them into the drawer in his mind, labeled in case anyone ever asks. Echo 2 breathed beside it. "A neat companion." "Shuffle up," the dealer said. Cards moved. Softened. The hum of the chandelier sharpened by remaining itself. The circle remade itself tighter and heavier. "Ready?" Victoria asked. "Ready," Jamal said. Marcus placed his hand back on the chair. The leather had cooled and warmed again. The screws beneath his fingertips felt true, properly seated, the kind you can trust until someone decides to strip the head. He took a breath in for 4 and let it out for 6, and found the small square of quiet he had claimed for himself at the back of this room. It was not large. It was enough. "Blinds," the dealer said, and named them. "Hand one," he added, and the first card of 50 slid toward Jamal like a thin, polite destiny. The circle drew smaller, heavier, and the first card of 50 slid toward Jamal like a thin, polite fate. Marcus settled behind his son, palm on leather, breath measured in a quiet 4 in and 6 out, while the chandelier's hush braided with the dry tick of chips. 2 early hands passed in summaries. Yama let dead cards tee. Victoria flicked harmless jabs, a testing raise here, a standard bet there. The dealer's voice stayed even. Shuffle, burn, turn, and the room swallowed the cadence. A few hands later, the air found a steady temperature. Jamal folded when the math disapproved, took one down pre-flop with a tidy price check, and surrendered a second when the line turned expensive. No fireworks. Procedure. He is banking the quiet, Marcus thought, saving oxygen for the climb. Then the table's heart rate lifted. Jamal opened. Victoria 3-bet with a number meant to move furniture. Jamal called with the patience of a boy reading to the end of a paragraph before deciding. The flop scattered a high card and 2 small companions. Victoria fired too much for the truth she was selling. Jamal paid the minimum toll. The turn made hearts possible and fear efficient. Jamal checked. She overreached by an ounce. He slid the rest across the felt, under the table. A quick 2-tap from her heel. Almost inaudible. Fold. He did not show. The silence respected the choice. Dorkausches skirmishes passed. Chips changed owners in teaspoons. Constance whispered something that did not reach meaning. Gerald swirled ice and pretended he was only thirsty. The room's machinery breathed. The red diode on the credenza blinked like a patient heartbeat. A small value bet landed on a river that allowed second best to pay without bitterness. Jamal stacked the chips and barely dipped his head when Marcus brushed the chair. A half-degree tilt that meant I am fine. Stay steady. The mundane condensed into quick markers. A small exchange of air, a forced fold. When the diamond at Victoria's throat lay still, and her breath refused to hitch, then the pace bent toward a decision. Hand 16 began with Jamal's raise, and Victoria's smooth, already decided call. The flop fell 9 and 7 and 5. More ideas than answers. Check. 1/3 from Jamal. A number that could be honesty or invention. Double from Victoria. Marcus held his breath and listened with his eyes. The necklace did not move. A late swallow arrived after the sentence instead of inside it. Jamal called. The turn solved nothing. Victoria paused, picked a story, fired heavy. Jamal counted consequences and released. A good fold. Pride and frustration barked at each other and sat. 3 hands later, the oxygen thinned to the point where Marcus could hear his own pulse. Jamal raised. Victoria called. The board paired queens with a 7, lacquer bright under the chandelier. Jamal checked. She checked behind, hoarding information. The turn brought a jack. Jamal set a small price. She raised to the edge of comfortable. One line of muscle flickered beneath her jaw and settled. Jamal called. The river handed down a 10, a card that made straights honest and mistakes expensive. Jamal let silence thicken until the ice in Gerald's glass stopped cracking. He set out a bet that turned curiosity into a tax. 800, he said, voice even. Victoria counted pot and history and boy and pride, then called because folding would taste like surrender. Jamal turned over ace and king for the straight, as calmly as a surgeon showing a clean incision. The hand died face down on her side. The dealer's fingers a quiet burial. Another skyline grew in front of a child. This is how you climb, Marcus thought, not in leaps. In footholds, you do not lose. The dealer's hands forecast good weather. Cards flew, landed, vanished, returned. Jamal bled nothing. He did not have to. Victoria found one precise value bet and realigned gravity. Constance watched the boy as if studying bone under skin. Gerald's grin learned to keep its voice down. Thomas lifted his phone from his knee. A tiny beep, almost imaginary, brushed the air. The red record light woke, and a faint reflection glowed across the glossy table. like a pinprick wound of light. In the corner of the screen, white numbers began their slow march. Marcus heard the air conditioning and that small electronic chirp as one sound, echo number 2 just locked. He thought, a document drawn in the room's own hand. Proof did not care who felt what. Halfway marks are guesses. But hand 23 felt like a hinge. Jamal raised with a sound like correctness. Victoria called. The flop returned Queen 7-7, a board that invited bad actors and punished them if they stayed too long. 1/3 from Jamal, a hard raise from Victoria, something between insult and dare. Jamal studied her hands, then her eyes, then the angle of her shoulders, armor more than posture. What is your kicker? He asked, voice measured, content clinical. You called from the blind. That suggests suited connectors or a medium pair. If you have a queen, the kicker decides it. I have a jack. You likely sit below me. Maybe queen and 10. Specificity shocked the air. Even Thomas forgot to pretend he was only texting. All in, Jamal said, pushing the wall forward with both hands. Calm as arranging books. The room froze. Marcus could hear the soft push of air through the vents and the low throb of his own heartbeat in his ears. Victoria looked at the chips she would lose or keep, then at the child who had just mapped her range in front of her friends, heel still, necklace still. Pride wrestled mathematics beneath her skin. Call, she said at last, and turned over queen with 10. The turn and river arrived like painting, all frame and no surprise. Jamal's queen with jack held. His stack rose into a tower that cast a new shadow, longer and colder. He counted your range. Thomas whispered to the lens and to himself, respect, slipping in. I have watched professionals miss that exact map. Marcus did not smile. He stamped the moment into his inner ledger. If anyone ever asks, hand 23 was the pivot. 2 more hands. 1 step aside. When her story grew teeth, 1 harvest of second best on a dry board. Jamal let impatience roll past him like weather. He conceded a pre-flop spot after a long technical glance that gifted Victoria a small measure of the respect she sold herself. Between hands, air made small noises. Ice sighed. The vent breathed cool, and even the chandelier hummed like a throat clearing. Marcus kept his breathing steady, a practiced metronome. By hand 30, the stacks told a story anyone could read. Jamal led by a margin that allowed breath between decisions. Victoria aligned and realigned the wet rings under her glass, then left them misaligned as if defiance could cheat gravity. She fought back with competence in the next hand, pressing a real edge and earning a murmured approval from the room. The professional in her had not vanished. Jamal nodded once at that truth, tightened a single click, and let 2 orbits pass without chasing noise. The room, smelling of rye and beeswax and cooled air, began to believe it was witnessing more than a novelty. The driver's son was not lucky. He was prepared. In this narrow slice of the world, he was better. Marcus glanced at the credenza diode and felt the comfort of boring vocabulary. Record, receipt, chain of custody. The camera blinked. The corner numbers walked. The wall clock ticked. If a story needed proof later, the room would provide. A few hands later, Victoria's slow played beyond reason. Jamal obeyed his notes. He checked a turn he might have bet, then carved a river slice that forced her to choose between being wrong loudly or wrong quietly. She chose the quiet wrong. Chips slid with a hush, like a curtain lowered in a respectful theater. After the next modest payoff, a block bet that earned exactly the right answer. Jamal's eyes flicked to the red dot for a breath. Not for attention, but for accountability. The way an engineer taps a gauge, then he returned to the work. Marcus filed that too. A boy who could see a camera and think of record-keeping, not applause. Hand 37. Victoria marched into a trap with bravery that deserved a kinder fate. Jamal tucked a full house under his sleeve and let her bet 3 times into it. He raised at the end only when her number promised she would pay for certainty. The dealer counted. The room made that soft sound it makes when two truths collide. Surprise and inevitability saying the same word. Somewhere in the kitchen, a spoon slipped and clattered. No one gave the sound a face. Gerald forgot to turn his cough into a joke. Constance set her glass down and left it alone. Thomas did not blink. His lens would blink for him if it must. By hand 41. Victoria trusted aggression more than anything. Jamal used her momentum against her. He bluffed exactly once in a place where correctness would feel wrong to call, the number chosen to deny her the satisfaction of courage. She folded and pressed her mouth into the shape of maybe. Marcus's lungs adopted a new rhythm, built from 3 facts. His son was executing a plan. The room was keeping the receipts. Pride and fear had learned to share the same rope. It could swing back. Variance did not learn manners for a child. Victoria had chips and competence enough to hurt him if he slipped, to punish any scent of arrogance. She did not need tells to win fairly. She only needed a string of right timings. And for a boy to be human, a small trade, a bluff that ran into a priced wall, then the shove. She pushed ace and king into his pocket 9s and watched 5 cards slide by without mercy. Jamal's stack climbed. Hers thinned to an honesty she had not chosen. The dealer's voice remained weatherproof. The chandelier did not change its tune. Air refused to pick a side. The math carried its neutral flag. At the count after that hand, the numbers settled like dust. Jamal led by enough to survive a bruise. Victoria retained enough to bruise him if he drifted. Courage was cheap for him and still costly for her. One more orbit completed like paperwork. No spike, no lull, no sag. The red dot did not dim. The clock hands moved forward with the mercy they were built to allow. Marcus stood behind the chair and let his palm learn the leather again. Warm, cool, warm, like something alive that trusted him. He tasted the old anxiety, then the new calm. He did not think about rent or medicine or school in numbers. He thought about Jamal's breath, steady, and the kitchen timer that had taught him to do this in a room that smelled like detergent and onions and a little burnt toast. He thought about money not being the dignity and how tonight, stubbornly, money had chosen to be the messenger anyway. A quick hand came and went, a trade of antes and a moral about patience. Then the last hand of the set slid in with a different gravity. The dealer glanced at both stacks as if acknowledging the end of a chapter. Jamal raised as he should. Victoria looked down, then up, then at the imperfect twin circles under her glass, and called with a calm, driven more by experience than pride. The flop did not favor anyone loudly. Jamal checked, not to be clever, but to shape an end. She checked back, conserving air. The turn improved a quiet truth. Jamal set a small price. She paid. The river tightened the narrative. Instead of breaking it open, Jamal offered a number that would make the wrong choice expensive. Victoria counted the pot, the history, the diamond that had held still so long, the red dot's steady blink, the boy's even breathing, and the face she needed to carry out of the room. She folded. The sound of that fold was the first grace the room had heard from her all night. "Good game," she said, the words new in her mouth and clean. "Thank you," Jamal said. He did not touch the chips yet. He leaned back the smallest inch, as if giving the room a frame for the portrait it had just painted. Marcus finally let himself breathe without counting. He did not look at the money. He looked at the boy. He looked at the red dot and the white corner numbers that would tell any future questioner exactly when this happened. He looked at the diamond that had stayed still, and only trembled when something human insisted. The cards gathered themselves, the felt exhaled, the chandelier's song slipped to background. Air returned to being air. The second match was not finished for the night. Not fully and not finally, but the slope had shifted under every foot on that rug. A father could feel that kind of change in his bones. Jamal had turned a room that might have devoured him into a room that recorded him. Between those two identities lay the dignity Marcus had promised his son, and the proof the room had decided to keep. Morning light slipped under the curtain, but Marcus had been awake long before it arrived. The phone on the table would not stop humming, a persistent insect at the edge of the room. Last night had been victory. This morning was consequence, arriving as invitations. Names he had only ever seen on the backs of headrests and event badges, now stacked on his screen. Each buzz felt like a fork in the road. Each subject line was a door swung open by the night before. On the couch, Jamal rubbed sleep from his eyes and sat up, hair pointing in every direction, the pillow line still printed on his cheek. Many calls. Dad, choices, Marcus said, and the word steadied him, even as it pressed on his chest. Looks like choices are coming to us. He picked up the phone and scrolled until meaning separated from noise. A message from Richard Chen, clean and direct, offering a conversation about an executive driver position he had not known existed for him. A voicemail from Dr. Patricia Morrison at the Advanced Learning Institute in Pasadena. The preview showing full scholarship and visit today. A polite note from a journalist he would not engage. A corporate dispatcher asking for a midday airport run he would not accept. An unknown number he recognized as the kind of shadowed errand the wealthy sometimes send after anger. Jamal watched his father the way he watches a complicated proof. Eyes moving, patience held. Which ones matter? Richard at late morning. Marcus said, tapping the blue confirm, and feeling the acceptance land inside the calendar like a small seal. And Dr. Morrison as soon as we can make it. Grandma first. Then both. They moved through the apartment in a choreography that felt like taking ownership. Marcus set water to boil. Jamal poured cereal and ate it standing at the counter, skimming the calendar invite. As if it were a schematic, Marcus forwarded the voicemail to email and saved it into last night's new folder, the one he had named with the date written out in full. He looked at the legal pad on the table where 3 words sat at the top like anchor stones: rent, family, future. Beside it, the receipt from the poker room rested under the soft morning light, crest and signatures crisp, time remembered in ink instead of adrenaline. By mid-morning they were at Dorothy's door with coffee and warm sweet rolls. She opened in a robe the color of dusty roses, hair silver and decisive, eyes bright with a principal's patience. "Tell me," she said, and Marcus did, without embellishment. The room with the felt and the chandelier humming like a ceiling full of bees, the hand that broke a fortune into clean stacks, the receipt that caught truth before it could slip, the firing delivered like a thin blade, the calls that felt less like luck and more like a recalibration. Dorothy listened, the corners of her mouth moving only when the story earned it. She reached for Jamal's hand and squeezed as if checking a heartbeat. "You did right, baby." Then she turned her voice toward Marcus, firm but warm. "And you did right too. Now keep doing right. You will go see Richard Chen. If he is who I hear, he treats people as people. You will meet Dr. Morrison. If she is who she sounds like, she sees a whole child, not a headline. You will keep records. Always." She buttered a roll, the knife making a soft scratch on the china, and lowered her voice with the weight of experience. "Protect the boy's childhood while you feed his gift. The world will tempt you to make him a performance. Do not let them. He is a son first, a student next, and a prodigy somewhere after that. Marcus swallowed against the small stone in his throat. Her reminder dropped into him like an anchor finding bottom. "We will, Mom," he said, and meant it. Downtown smelled different than last night's marble halls. The Chen Technologies Tower wore its glass without boasting. The lobby was quiet and efficient, the kind of quiet built by good air and soft shoes rather than fear. The elevator slid up almost without a sound, announcing floors with a modest chime. On the 20th floor, the air carried a faint, clean fragrance of tea and lemon cloth. A receptionist greeted Marcus by name without asking to keep his license hostage, a small thing, but it landed. Richard met them himself. Sleeves rolled, tea absent, the handshake that balanced respect and ease. "Marcus, good to meet you properly. Jamal, welcome." His voice carried the grounded confidence of someone who has done hard things, not the brittle volume of someone trying to prove it. He led them down a hallway where plants sat like punctuation marks and into a corner with a city view that did not need to shout. "My dad drove a cab for many years," he said, as casually as one might mention a favorite teacher, studied at night. Passed his exam on the 4th try. People treated him like furniture they could scold. "We do not do that here." He turned to Marcus. "This role runs on trust. Pay is transparent. Hours are sane. Health insurance begins on day 1. Do you have questions?" Marcus asked the kind that reveal as much about the asker as the job. Fleet, maintenance, schedules, after-hours boundaries. What happens when a run changes midstream? Richard's answers arrived specific and clean. A handbook on a tablet, not waved vaguely at a website. Benefits explained without condescension. An HR form offered without the power move of a clipboard. No one looked at Jamal like a parlor trick. When they stood to leave, Richard addressed Jamal as if speaking to an apprentice craftsman. "I hear you think clearly under pressure. If you would ever like to sit in with one of our quant teams for an afternoon, we can arrange an educational shadow. You are 12. The boundary was baked into the invitation. "Thank you, Seer," Jamal said, and the thank you held both gratitude and line drawing. Richard walked them to the elevator, and a follow-up email arrived before the doors opened at the lobby. A conditional offer letter with salary and a start date in black ink. Not ghosted gray. An onboarding appointment for the next Monday in late morning. Marcus read the subject line and felt a small echo of last night's room, the opposite of its cold. This was respect written down, not a smile added to a debt. Pasadena warmed the edges of the day. Taller trees, quieter crosswalks, the sort of streets that carry thought without stealing it. The Advanced Learning Institute lived in a brick building that once sorted letters and now sorted potential. The glass door bore 3 modest words: inquiry, integrity, impact. Inside was noise of a different kind from the night before. Not clatter, not bravado, the low swarm of minds at work, the tang of dry erase marker and solder, the soft clink of glassware where a student tested something that might become a science fair ribbon or a new way to think. Dr. Morrison greeted them with a handshake that said both welcome and expectation. She had her degrees on the wall but did not wear them as armor. She addressed Jamal at eye level without theatrics. "Jamal, I am glad you are here. Come see what the rooms sound like." They moved through a tour that did not waste time. 3 students around a printer argued about nozzle temperature, like surgeons debating a suture. 2 kids at laptops coded in companionable silence, logic reflecting off their faces. At a seminar table, a girl in a hoodie walked a shy older boy through a proof, patient and relentless. Dr. Morrison let them witness before she explained, "We prepare for the work and for the world that will misunderstand the work." We teach mathematics and physics and also boundaries and advocacy and rest. In a back classroom, she placed a small puzzle of numbered tiles on a table. Arrange these so the border constraints all hold. She said, "No hurry. It is not a test, it is a conversation." Jamal bent to it, the way he bends to everything that matters to him. Shoulders loose, attention disciplined. He tried one pattern, paused, rotated a tile, smiled, the small smile of recognition rather than triumph. In under a few minutes he straightened, palms light on the table. "What did you see?" Dr. Morrison asked. "Not how did you do it. Symmetry first," Jamal said. "Then the place where the symmetry lied, that told me which constraint could flex. After that it was a parity check, just a parity check," Dr. Morrison said with dry amusement. Making a note, she turned to Marcus and slid a 2-page document across. "Our aid terms, full scholarship awards without clawbacks. We do not photograph children for marketing without consent. No media on campus without purpose. No acceleration that trades academic velocity for social safety." She tapped a line near the end. "We partner with families, not with headlines." Marcus read every word. He initialed 3 boxes, signed his name in a hand steadier than it had been in a long time. At the front desk, the secretary made a copy and stamped it received with the date and the time in small black numerals. The stamp's quick thud satisfied something practical in him. "Chain of custody matters," he said, half to himself and half to the walls that would be his child's walls. "Yes," she said, "it does." On the sidewalk, Jamal held the thin orientation folder like a book he had hoped existed. The question in his eyes was not if they could afford it now, it was the older math. "Can I belong here?" "Yes," Marcus said. "You can." They drove back toward the city with new papers in a manila envelope. In the car, sounds marked the difference between worlds, the soft, muffled roar of the freeway under their tires, the faint rattle of a water bottle in the door pocket, the gentle ticking of the turn signal at an exit. Marcus's phone chimed in a calmer tone, the one he used for events he chose to keep, an onboarding email with details, a follow-up from the Institute with dates for placement sessions, and a permission form for an off-site mentor program. Subject lines that did not sell, did not flatter, did not threaten, they simply recorded. Each time stamp felt like a brick in a wall built of proof. At home, the kitchen met them with the welcome of lemon soap and the stubborn ficus that refused to decide between survival and flourish. They laid out the new pages on the table like artifacts in a small private museum. The offer letter, the scholarship agreement, the photocopy with the neat block stamp, the photo Jamal had taken last night of the legal pad with its 3 headings, the poker room receipt with its crest catching light. Marcus opened the folder on his phone, slid the new files into place, titled them with full words and dates. He printed the essential one, slipped them into clear sleeves. The whisper of plastic sounded like a vow. "Are we safe?" Jamal asked, elbows on the table, chin in his hands. 12 and older than 12 at the same time. "Safer," Marcus said. "Safe is a word from fairy tale. We are building something sturdier, habits that keep truth from getting lost." Jamal nodded and opened the tiny spiral notebook Dr. Morrison had given him. On the first page he wrote the date, then a line, observation. He wrote, and paused, then finished. "People who respect you do not add weight to your words to see if you can carry it." He glanced up, a little shy. "Is that silly?" "It is perfect," Marcus said. He sent a clear reply to Richard with, "Thanks, and see you Monday." He called Dorothy to report and held the phone so Jamal could hear her say the sentence she had been saying to him since he was small. "Excellence is its own revolution." He texted Thomas a thank you and received back a simple pride note, not a performance, which felt like closing the door gently on last night's worst edges. They finished arranging papers. The apartment grew quiet, a quiet that felt earned, not empty. Outside, a siren wrote a brief line and then ended. A neighbor's door closed with a soft click. For a moment, Marcus felt something like a weather change move through his chest. Not dread exactly, but the sense that the storm had a trailing edge still somewhere out there. The phone on the table buzzed once more, a single, insistent vibration that did not match his new calendar tone. Unknown number. Marcus considered letting it pass under the surface of the day. Then he picked it up. 6 words filled the preview line. "I owe you both an apology." He looked at Jamal, then set the phone face down again, not as denial but as discipline. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we answer the calls that make us more ourselves." Jamal nodded, the orientation folder under his arm like a compass. The afternoon light moved across the table and touched the receipt, the offer, the scholarship stamp, the little spiral notebook with its first observation already truer than most headlines. The city outside kept counting its hour. Inside, father and son added a new entry to their own ledger. Choices had arrived. Now came the habit of choosing. The phone on the table hummed again, face down, as if collecting on a debt that could not be postponed. Marcus stared at the faint ghost of a preview through the glass. 6 words, weighted like a card that wanted turning. "I owe you both an apology." Apology, or bait, he asked himself, the question landing in his chest like a spare key that might fit a stranger's lock. Jamal looked up from the small spiral notebook. His voice was steady, not daring and not afraid. "Answer it, Dad." Marcus slid his thumb and lifted the phone. "This is Marcus." Her voice arrived thinner than the night before, stripped of lacquer, careful as glass set on stone. "Marcus, it is Victoria. I will not take much of your time. I behaved terribly. I was humiliated, and I lashed out. That is not an excuse. I am sorry." He straightened, palm finding the counter's cool edge, as if the room had shifted by a quiet degree. "Thank you for saying it. I also fired you," she said. The words pulled like rope through a ring. "I will not pretend I did not mean it then, but I do not wish to harm you now. If you need a reference that is honest and not punitive, I will provide it." A breath on the line, thin and sincere. "We will be fine," Marcus said. "We are moving forward. Jamal will be starting with a new program. I have a new opportunity. I am glad," she said. Humility, new in a voice that had worn command for years. "May I speak to Jamal?" Marcus held the phone out. Jamal took it, shoulders, drawing a quiet line of resolve. "Hello, Mrs. Sterling." "Jamal, I owe you a direct apology," Victoria said. "I invited you to my home to make a point at your expense. You answered with grace and skill, and I punished you for it. You won fairly. You were remarkable. I taught you nothing. You taught me something I did not want to learn. I am sorry." "Thank you for apologizing," Jamal said. "I hope last night does not cause too much trouble for you." "You are kinder than I deserve," she said. A short laugh without sharpness. "Trouble I can manage. Humility will take work. You told me I have patterns I do not see. I touched my necklace when I felt strong. I tapped my foot when I lied to myself. I have been thinking about that all morning. I do not want to be the kind of person who needs a child to beat her at cards to notice her own tells." Jamal paused, then offered a sentence that sounded older than his age, and exactly his age. "People can change when they decide to keep a record, not just a story. That is what my dad says. Keep what happened, not what you wish had happened." Marcus closed his eye. In the pipe behind the wall, water ticked from cool to warm to still. Outside, a delivery truck downshifted, then moved on. Victoria drew a breath that sounded like someone setting a heavy object on a new shelf. I have one more request, not a condition, a request. I would like to apologize in person, to you and to your father, without audience and without performance, in the room where I behaved cheaply. If you decline, I will not call again. Marcus took the phone back. We will come, he said, hearing Dorothy in his own voice. We set the terms. Daylight. No observers. No drinks. No game. Only conversation. Agreed. Victoria said at once. Today, if possible. This afternoon, Marcus said, writing the time on the legal pad under the word future. He ended the call. Jamal stood with the orientation folder tucked to his ribs like a small shield he would not need to raise. We will go on our terms, Marcus said, and when we come back, we leave it in that room. They dressed as if for a meeting where words matter. Jamal chose the same button-down he had worn the night before, now ironed flat, not to repeat a costume but to carry a witness. Marcus slipped the poker receipt into the folder beside the scholarship letter, not to brandish, only to keep the truth near. He opened his notes app and started a new entry. Meeting. Name. Address. Attendees. He set the phone face up. The call log. A neat ladder of time. Chain of custody. He said, almost a prayer. Jamal smiled without showing teeth. Daylight made the mansion look less mythic and more expensive. The drive threw heat back into their faces. The fountain sounded like plumbing. A staffer opened the door with quiet professionalism and led them not to the poker room, but to a smaller study that looked onto citrus trees. The carpet in here was pale and honest. The shelves were real wood and had been touched by hands that read. The window was open, a finger's width. Sun laid a soft stripe across the floor and promised to move it. Victoria stood without armor. No heels, no necklace, no glass in hand. Her clothes were plain in the way that costs more. She waited for them to sit, then sat herself, completing a triangle of chairs that did not pretend to be a circle. Thank you for coming, she said, and for agreeing to terms that are yours, not mine. Marcus glanced once around the room. No second door ager, no shadow of a watcher. Good. Victoria faced Jamal first. I said this on the phone, but I will say it where my face must carry it. I am sorry. I tried to turn you into a novelty. You were a person in a room, not a prop in my story, and I did not respond as a person. You were extraordinary, and you were ordinary in the way that matters most. A child who prepared, that should have earned basic respect. From me, it did not. Now it does. Thank you, Jamal said, palms open on his knees. I accept your apology. She turned to Marcus. I fired you to control a feeling I did not know how to survive. I told myself I was protecting my reputation. I punished you for my embarrassment. It was cruel. I apologize. I will not try to hire you back and call it repair. If you want a letter, you will have it. If you need me to vanish, I will. We will be fine. Marcus said, one more thing. Please do not call families I have served to poison the well. If that has begun, please stop. We do not need a favor. We need absence. Her mouth tightened, then released the old habit. That was my plan last night, she said, plain as chalk. It is not my plan today. I will not make those calls. If anyone asks, I will tell the truth. You were professional. It is the truth. Through the cracked window drifted a clean citrus note, sharper than last night's perfume that had tried to pass for power. Sun warmed the stripe across the carpet until it touched the toe of Jamal's shoe. There is one more thing, she said, and the sentence cost her. I have a daughter. She is bright and she is bored. And the school is wrapping her in shiny paper and setting her on a high shelf. You mentioned a program. Would they even consider us, given what I have done? Marcus thought of Dorothy's line. We do not judge parents who are trying to do right by their children. He let that line do its work in him before he spoke. Dr. Morrison looks at the child first. He said, "If your daughter belongs, she belongs. We can make an introduction." "Thank you," Victoria said, tears arriving too fast for strategy. She willed them back and managed a real laugh, not a release, a recognition. Jamal said softly, "If she comes, tell her to bring a notebook. They give you one, but it feels good to have your own. Write what you notice before someone tells you what to notice." "Noted," Victoria said, and for a breath she looked less like an emblem and more like a mother who had been handed a map. They did not linger. Apologies dilute when repeated. Marcuse rose. She stood with him. He offered his hand, because leaving with a handshake draws a clean underline. Her grip met his in the middle. No victory pressed. No debt collected. In the driveway, the fountain hissed in sun like a kettle. The stone threw heat. The car's air settled their collars and slowed the pulse at Marcus's throat. He pulled away without checking the mirror a second time. The mansion slid behind them like a scene change pulled by quiet hands. On the way home, Jamal opened his notebook and printed a single sentence in careful lines. "People do not change because you beat them. They change because they begin keeping new records." He closed the cover and pressed it with his palm, as if to seat the ink. Back at the apartment, silence held that rare quality that belongs to rooms where honest work has been done. Marcus set the phone on the table and drew the legal pad toward him. He uncapped his pen and, in the hush, the nib began its small, firm song. The scratch of ink was a metronome for a heart settling. Meeting. Name. Place. Time. Apology offered. Apology accepted. Boundaries set. He paused, leaned back, and looked at the words. Each line felt like a latch catching. He lifted the phone and framed the page. The camera made its soft little oath. He saved the image to the folder where the receipt rested beside the offer letter, and the scholarship copy with the stamp. He scrolled through them once, a quiet litany of paper that did not lie. Offer, stamp, receipt, note. He exhaled, long and measured. This, he thought, is the lock, not the slam of a door, the placement of a bolt. The apartment breathed, pipes settled. Somewhere down the hall, a neighbor laughed, a short, warm burst, and then gone. Outside, tires whispered on wet pavement left by a brief passing sprinkle. Jamal leaned on the counter and watched his father watch the words. "What now?" he asked. "Now we keep walking toward the choices we made." Marcus said, "Monday for me. New term for you. When the story tries to drag us back to that table, we show our records and shut the door." A new email slid in with a softened chime. Dr. Morrison confirming a mentor visit the following week. Subject line as plain as a label on a drawer. Confirmation. The timestamp sat under it like a seal pressed into wax. Marcus set the phone down. He touched the legal pad once, then set the pen neatly across the top line. He looked at his son, then at the small dossier of a new life spread on their worn table. Outside, the city kept its own time. Inside, the lock held, not to keep the world out, but to keep what mattered in. The conference floor breathed cool and clean, the kind of air that tells you someone cares how a room feels. Marcus stepped out with Jamal and felt his chest lift. No perfume fog, no velvet noise, only the soft thrum of systems working. He closed his hand around his son's shoulder and told himself this was not another game. This was the ceiling of truth. Richard met them in shirt sleeves and a calm that steadied the hallway. "Good to see you," his voice said, without needing flourish. He led them into a glass-walled room where pale oak waited. Water in steel carafes caught a quiet stripe of light, and notepads lay open like small white doors. Outside, The city clicked and flashed. Inside, you could hear an air vent breathe. Dr. Morrison arrived with a slim binder and a tamper bag. The color of a red stoplight, her shoes were sensible, her eyes bright and anchored. "We keep this clean," she said, warmth wrapped in procedure. "Then we talk about better things." The elevator chimed again. Victoria stepped out alone, without guards, without a necklace, without any of the armor that had felt like policy the night before. She paused at the glass as if asking permission from the room, and Richard opened the door with the same level hand he would have offered anyone. "Thank you," she said, and sat far enough to show she had come to witness, not to steer. Thomas slipped in last with a soft apology and a black case. His phone was already set to a gallery, the small red dot on its screen like a heartbeat. "I brought what I recorded," he said. "We play what you approve, or nothing at all." Marcus looked around the table. A founder, a head of school, a venture man with a conscience, a woman who had power and had been stripped of its costume for a morning, a boy who had prepared, and a father who had decided to write the story down. His shoulders dropped a fraction. This was a room where paper spoke louder than posture. Richard placed a small digital clock at center. The blue numbers glowed, then began to count. "For the record," he said, and then he met Marcus's eyes, making the words precise. "Your record. Not mine. Tell me if anything should stop." Dr. Morrison set the tamper bag down, red seal unbroken and loud against the wood. Inside lay a thumb drive the color of a dark cherry, and a folded sheet with boxes for signatures. "This is the copy I made from the file Thomas sent overnight," she said. "I have not opened it. We can log it under seal at the Institute or destroy it after confirming the original sits safely with its owner. Your call." Thomas unclipped his case and set his phone on the table face up. "If we play anything," he said, "it will be 10 seconds, enough to show the room, the time, that nothing was staged. Then we stop, then chain of custody, then you decide the fate of it." Marcus felt the quiet weight of Dorothy's rule settle in his chest. "Keep what happened, not what people wish had happened." He nodded. "We archive one sealed copy at the Institute," he said. "No public distribution. We play a sliver for verification. Then we log the hands that touched it." Richard slid a half page from one of 2 manila folders. No clauses like nets, only plain lines. Acknowledgement of private verification, names, date, time, purpose. Distribution limited to the sealed archive and the original recorder. Publication only with written consent of Marcus and Jamal. Witness space. It read like a promise rather than a trap. "No musle." Marcus said, "No musle." Richard answered. Victoria released a breath that had been standing in her throat since the elevator. "Thank you," she said, and her voice was smaller and clearer for the lack of ornament. "Before we open anything," Dr. Morrison said, "I want Jamal to say in his words why we are here." Jamal glanced at the blue clock, watching the seconds walk, then looked at the adults. "To keep the story from floating away," he said. "So when people ask what happened, there is something stamped in time, so that Emily can step into school without anyone saying we lied to hurt her mother." The name landed without malice and made the air honest. Victoria flinched. Not from offense, but from recognition. Richard touched the clock with a fingertip. "For the record," he said, "what we will view now is a private clip taken by Thomas Reeves on the night in question. The purpose is verification and nothing else." He looked to Marcus. "Ready?" Marcus nodded. Thomas connected a cable, and the wall screen woke in gray. A space bloomed into view, and the obscene luxury of the previous night looked flatter, its gloss made ordinary by a lens that refused to flatter. A block of small white numerals marked the upper corner like a notarized seal. Jamal's voice drifted into the room, low and exact. Not luck. Math. The camera tipped enough to catch a foot tapped twice under a chair, a small tell that had once felt harmless and had cost a fortune. The 10 seconds ended. Thomas froze on the timestamp, then blacked the screen and pulled the cable. He did not smile. He did not comment. He set the phone down face up again, the little red dot gone. Silence settled, and did not need to be told how to behave. Dr. Morrison lifted the bag and turned it so everyone could see the unbroken red line. She tore it with a sound like a fresh page quick through the air. She read a string of hash characters from Thomas's handwritten note and matched them on her laptop, calling each block aloud like a serial at a loading dock. Match, she said. She placed the drive into an encrypted archive, labeled it with date and time in clear words, slid it back into a fresh bag, pressed a new seal, and the adhesive answered with a hush, a door closing gently. Archived, she said. Access by written request from Marcus and Jamal only. Richard pushed the acknowledgement across the oak. Marcus signed, ink biting cleanly into paper. Jamal printed his name with the care of a science fair placard, middle initial tucked in like a small hinge. Thomas signed as provider, Dr. Morrison as archivist, Richard as witness, his signature tight and deliberate. Each stroke sounded like a small oath in a room that respected sound. "Thank you for letting me be present," Victoria said. She reached into a simple leather folder and placed an envelope on the table without theater. "This is for the Institute. If you accept it, it remains anonymous. No wall names. No press. A portion reserved for scholarships for students who are gifted and misfitted by their current schools. If you decline, I will route it elsewhere. Either way, my apology stands." Dr. Morrison did not touch the envelope yet. She turned to Marcus and to Jamal. "Your call. Use it to make more room." Marcus said, "Keep the names off the walls. Build benches. Buy buspases. Pay mentors. We do not carve donors into children's space." Dr. Morrison said, a dry smile under the line. She slid the envelope into her binder and closed it with a soft click that felt like decency being filed. Richard tapped the remaining folder. "One more practical matter," he said. "Marcus, your offer letter begins Monday. Health coverage begins day 1. There is a line I required. When the Institute needs transport for competitions or visits, you will have flex time if you choose to drive. I am not calling it a perk. It is respect for the job that outranks any office here." Marcus's throat tightened and eased. He pressed his palm to the paper as if taking an oath. "Thank you," he said, and the words came out like relief that had chosen to stand up straight. Thomas gathered his case and paused. "For what it is worth," he told Victoria gently, "I did not send that clip anywhere else. People ask, I said the story did not belong to me." "Thank you," she said. The two words simple and correct. They stood. Chairs made soft sounds on oak. No speeches tried to inflate the ending. Dr. Morrison tucked the sealed bag into her binder like a gem headed for a vault that would stay shut. Richard opened the door and let corridor air touch their faces. The hallway felt honest. The elevator bell offered a modest note, and they stepped inside with the feeling of a room behind them closing for the right reasons. In the brushed metal reflection, Marcus saw a father with a folder and a boy with a spiral notebook, both wearing the same new quiet they had earned. When the doors opened, the lobby light was gentle. The front desk hummed with a few keystrokes, and the faint sound of a coffee machine at the far end. No chip-clack, no forced laughter, only the work of a weekday. Outside, a bus sighed and moved. Shoes clicked on clean stone. A courier laughed once into a phone and then was gone. Marcus and Jamal walked side by side, and the city's bright racket slid around them without sticking. That was not loud, Jamal said. Loud breaks. Marcus answered. Records hold. What next? Jamal asked. Lunch. Marcus said. And then we go tell your grandmother we did it right. They crossed at a light and headed toward a small place with steam inside the window. As they walked, Jamal slid the notebook from under his arm and wrote a single clean line. We kept it clean. He capped the pen with a click that sounded like a tiny seal pressed into wax. He looked up at his father and smiled. Marcus felt the sentence sit in him like a key that matched a lock he had been carrying for years. They did not need the world to clap. The world would chatter anyway. What mattered had been stamped and signed in a quiet room where the air was cool and the paper did not lie. They pushed through the door of the lunch place. Bells on a string offered a simple song, and the warmth met them like a hand to the shoulder. The story outside could bend, the record would not. The ballroom did not sparkle. It held its breath. Air conditioning hummed low. Cables lay in straight black veins across carpet, and the whisper of chips sliding over felt became the room's heartbeat. Marcus signed what needed signing. The paper warm from the printer, ink dark and honest, a laminate badge clipped to Jamal's collar with a small click. Record. Witness. Time. He felt steadier just seeing it. Dr. Morrison arrived with a canvas tote and the hush of someone who has shepherded brilliance through storms. She pressed a small spiral notebook into Jamal's hand. For reset breaths between hands, she said. If the noise tries to get in. David Kim joined with a quick nod, eyes mapping cameras and exits. This is television with card, not a casino, he murmured. Decisions over drama. Process over heat. They walked to the assigned table. The dealer's hands were a metronome. Across the felt, a tech founder sat as if the spotlight were a mirror. Beside him, a professional with slate calm stacked towers. With the efficiency of muscle memory, the room smelled like cold air and new carpet. Above them, lights were bright but not cruel. The first rounds passed like a language test. Jamal folded and watched, then called small, then folded again. He breathed through his nose and wrote a single word in the spiral, then shut it. He did not chase applause. He let the room mistake quiet for caution. The roaming camera drifted by, unblinking. Marcus stood at the rail, palms flat, willing his pulse to slow. A staffer called time in a voice trained to land softly. The professional opened and took a pot without resistance, then glanced at Jamal, not at his face but at his hand. She was reading. Good. The boy knew how to be read and to read back. When a former athlete shoved with the force of a lifetime of fourth quarters, Jamal looked down and took longer than anyone wanted him to. He was not counting money. He was weighing doors. Call, he said at last, and when the dealer spread nothing dangerous, the room exhaled. Chip slid his way with a soft ceramic sigh. Marcus felt a thread untie in his chest. Not luck. Measurement. On break. David did not ask what the cards were. He asked what Jamal felt in his chest when the pressure crested. Less than fear, Jamal said. More like a scale finding level. Good, David said. Keep measuring. By late afternoon, a rhythm settled. Jamal passed on television hands and took the ones that mattered. He did not force proof. He let proof arrive because he had prepared. The professional tried a story that rang a little hollow, and he pressed back just enough to make her fold with a curl at the corner of her mouth that looked like respect. The tech founder played to the rail and to his own reflection. His laughter sat a little too high when he lost, a little too loud when he won. Marcus recognized the tremor. He had heard hubris on marble. It sounded the same on carpet. The soundscape sharpened as players fell. Chairs scraped. A production assistant whispered into a headset. Somewhere behind the stanchions, a spectator dropped a plastic cup and winced. Jamal kept his shoulders level. He touched the spiral between hands, the way a musician touches wood for grounding. Final table lights rose a notch, and the room narrowed to 9 faces and a camera that did not blink. A trophy waited on a pedestal like a joke about importance. Jamal's chip bags rustled like dry leaves. He sat third from the dealer, not a target, not a passenger. Enough. The blue countdown clock restarted. The dealer burned and dealt and turned cardboard into consequence. 9th place became a handshake. 8th followed. Jamal picked spots and survived. Then hunted. Christine, steady as stone, caught a bluff from the tech founder and stacked him with a nod. The rail murmured. The lights warmed. The chips made their small rain sounds. Jamal took a pot off Christine with a line that said, "I know you know," and she folded and said under her breath, "All right then." Respect is a door that opens both ways. 4-handed, the table turned honest. When there are only 4 stories left, there is less room for fiction. Christine opened on the button. Yamel defended, then raised a board that seemed to belong to the aggressor. She looked at him, counted something private, and let it go. "You are a problem," she said, quietly enough to be human. He smiled once, small, 3-handed. The tech founder offered a deal with the smile of a man used to turning outcomes into networking. The professional refused without blinking. Jamal matched her. "Same," he said. The Advanced Learning Institute needed the full promise, not a comfortable division. Principles can look like stubbornness, but only from far away. The hand that sent them to heads up happened fast. Jamal found a moment with real weight and did not decorate it. He raised. They fought back, and then there was nothing left to do but let math and poise carry it. Polita applause. A good game. A walk to the rail. The lights seemed brighter, or maybe the air thinner. The ballroom amplified small sounds, the scrape of a chair, the lift of a glass, the breath someone thought they were holding privately. Then there were 2. The producer turned the music down so the room could hear itself. The tech founder sat taller, as if posture could alter math. He talked more now, telling the table what his bets meant. He believed in pressure as a virtue, in momentum as a law. Jamal did not answer. He arranged chips, watched pulse points, listened for the soft betrayals of breath and foot. He had learned tells in a room that smelled like leather and wine. He could hear them here amid cable and light. Marcus's fingers pressed crescents into the rail and released by habit. He did not think of trophies. He thought of a plastic pillbox with days stenciled in, of brake pads grinding thin, of a tuition line on a spreadsheet like an unclimbed hill. He thought of the Institute's lab benches and bus passes and mentors, of children whose names he did not know yet, but who would walk through a door if this kid held it open. He thought of health insurance, steady and boring as oxygen. All of that concentrated into a single wish. Let the boy be excellent. The room found a thick silence that felt almost physical. Chips clicked, then stopped. The announcer's voice receded to the edges. The air smelled like coffee and wiring and a faint, expensive cologne. A camera rig glided by with a whisper of wheels. Yamal raised, and the man across from him pressed back hard. A shove from the mouth of ego, all in. Without the word, his voice lifted when he said it. The silence deepened. Marcus felt the old panic rise. That animal thing that counts missed rent and unpaid bills with the speed of a metronome gone too fast. He heard his mother's voice in memory say, "Breathe through your nose, son." And he did. Health insurance sat on one side of a scale. A scholarship endowment sat there as well. Pride did not sit on the other side. It stood behind the boy like a wall. Jamal did not count chips. He counted history. He counted study hours in a small kitchen. Mornings with David Kim, where they talked about process instead of glory. Evenings with his father, where excellence was not a speech, but the way you washed a plate. He counted the overreach he had watched all day, the way the other man's laughter got bigger when it needed to get quieter, the way his hands sped up in victory and in fear. He looked once at Marcus. His father did not nod or shake his head. He simply stood and made the air steadier. "Call," Jamal said. No card names mattered when the dealer spread the future into the present. The room held still long enough for Marcus to hear ice settle in a glass at the back rail. The final card fell. The math won. The shove had been a costume. The truth wore plainer clothes. For a heartbeat there was no sound. Then the ballroom released itself. A cheer swelled, messy and real. The tournament director appeared like a stage cue and raised Jamal's wrist. The trophy looked ridiculous and absolutely right. The oversized check for the institute made zeros into a constellation. Cameras flashed. Names were recorded correctly. A staffer slid a ledger forward and asked for signatures that made charity into logistics. Jamal's name on paper sounded like a promise when the pen scratched. The man across from him walked the arc of the table and held out a hand without spin. "Not good enough tonight," he said, and the humility landed clean. Jamal shook it and gave respect without renting out accuracy. "You played well, sire." Photos. Of course, a scripted line from the director, a grin from a volunteer, a microphone that wanted quotes and got something better. In the wings, Thomas filmed a small private button for the school's archive, a close frame of hands sealing a document envelope, a date written in careful strokes, a hash value printed out and stapled to a chain of custody form. "Keep what happened. Keep it clean." At the edge of the room, near the black drape, Victoria stood half inside the light and half outside it. When Marcus noticed her, she did not beckon. She lifted her chin once. "I saw, I learned, I will spend this change on purpose. No performance, just a small admission and a silent exit." They found the outside and the desert air, the casino smell thinning into something like night. The valet bell chimed softly, then calmed. Jamal held the trophy like a thing to set on a shelf, not a crown. Marcus looped an arm around his son and felt the boy's breath slow against his side. He thought of the mansion and the humiliation promised and denied. He thought of a kitchen table and a neat grid of bills. He thought of a school that would get microscopes and bus passes and mentors because a kid kept his math under pressure. He thought, this is what execution means, not a flourish, a signature at the right time for the right reason, a breath taken when others hold it, a call made because the numbers and the human being line up. They slid into the car. The trophy rested on Jamal's knees, cool and absurd. "Ready?" the boy asked, not with adrenaline, but with something steadier. "Ready," Marcus said. The word did not mean finished. It meant present. It meant capable of the next right thing. He turned the key. The engine's low hum folded under the night's wider quiet. They pulled away from lights that had wanted a show and into a darkness that made room for what comes after. No more clatter of chips, no more breath held on an edge. Morning entered the apartment like a verdict turned gentle, riding on the soft hiss of the city waking. A bus sighed at the corner. A neighbor tugged a plastic bin across cracked concrete. Somewhere below, a rolled gate lifted with a long metallic yawn and then settled. Marcus listened and named it in his chest. Normal. After weeks inside the storm, normal sounded like music. The trophy did not live where applause could find it. It rested on the bookcase beside the beach photograph of Sarah, her hair blown sideways, as if arguing with the wind. Marcus dusted both with the same care, then cracked the window so the ordinary air could wander in and claim the space. He made coffee. The kettle ticked toward the boil, a domestic metronome. He poured, and the aroma rose like a small promise kept. Jamal drifted in, hair flattened on one side, voice husky with sleep. He did not look like a headline. He looked 12, reaching for a bowl and tapping cereal out in the practiced measure of habit. For a breath, they just listened to the city breathe, and the spoon tapped the rim. Do we keep the routine? Dad, we keep the routine. Son. They ate at the scarred table where money had once crossed like a river, where pencil dents still mapped probabilities in shallow scars. Marcus liked evidence that did not need screens. He watched his son scan a page from the Institute, resistors and battery icons drawn with clean lines, and felt the day clear. By noon he was on the freeway, the new badge on his shirt catching a square of sun through the windshield. Head of transportation did not feel like a title so much as a task. He greeted drivers by name. He learned which buses carried a stubborn rattle, and which routes needed 10 extra minutes when rain braided the streets. He walked the lot and pressed his palm to a tire to feel its warmth, as if a bus could confess to him. The Chen campus smelled faintly of tea and printer ink. Hallways did not shiver when he approached. Desks faced windows. The elevator chimed like a polite question. Richard waved him into a glassed office that looked over a courtyard where young trees wore the hopeful green of new decisions. "How is the schedule?" Richard asked, holding. Marcus let the word land like a small flag planted, and the boy, learning to be bored between flashes again, Marcus said, smiling at the table. "That is a useful muscle." Richard's laugh had no edge. "Take your time with the policy deck," he said. "Build something that outlasts both of us." So Marcus did. He wrote procedures like traffic diagrams, clean lanes, and honest merges. He set a rule about brakes that no one had to earn by pretending to be fine. He slid the coffee machine to the corner where paths crossed, a small architecture for decent days. Every adjustment made a sound, a chair rolling into light, a printer whispering instead of sighing, a meeting that ended on time. After work, he drove not to a hilltop mansion but to Pasadena, to the reimagined office building that housed the Advanced Learning Institute. The lobby smelled of books, warmed by sun and the faint pepper of solder. Down the hall, a student in a hoodie missed a note on a violin and then laughed at the miss before finding it. That laugh measured the room better than a blueprint. Dr. Morrison met them with forms and a softness reserved for people she trusted. Her office walls carried photographs of former students beside the things they had built: a solar car, a tiny satellite, a kite strung with sensors. She slid the donation paperwork to Marcus. Clauses crisp, terms kind and clear, sentences that could live in a drawer without waking anyone at night. "We record what helps," she said. "We do not record what punishes." Clarity is a kind of care. In the lab, Jamal moved like someone entering a room he had been sketching for months. He trailed a finger along the housing of a printer and treated it like a living thing. A ninth grader in goggles handed him a pipette and said, "Try." He did. His breathing settled into the steady cadence of making. Near pickup time, a small girl waited by the doorway with a backpack too big for her shoulders, hugging a spiral notebook like a float. Emily stood in the place where bright spaces send you out softer than you came in. Victoria kept a respectful distance on the sidewalk. In daylight without armor, she looked human tired, unvarnished. Jamal lifted a hand in easy greeting. "Want a second pass through robotics?" Emily nodded and followed. Her steps sounded light, as if her feet had finally found the floor that belonged to them. Victoria turned to Marcus. "Thank you," she said, and let the words sit without reaching for more. "I am trying to become unimportant in the right places." It would have been easy to reach for a sharp reply. Marcus found no muscle for cruelty. He thought of evidence and of what changes people better than punishment. He thought of a boy who believed that growth was a choice you could keep choosing. For her sake, he said, keep going. Weeks blurred into a gentler kind of busy. Jamal split time between school and the institute, where hours were measured not by bells but by projects and questions. He joined a cluster of kids building a sensor kit to map heat across local streets. He came home smelling of solder and cafeteria pizza, the scent of ordinary teenagers who happened to be extraordinary without performance. At home, they kept habits that had become a language, dates on envelopes, receipts stapled to plain paper, and slid into a folder labeled with a year and a feeling. Truth spoken aloud before it went on a page. Marcus ran 3 routes every morning, then came home most nights at a decent hour with a satisfaction that refused to call itself pride. It was work. It was good. It did not ask him to be someone else. Sometimes the past knocked softly, like a neighbor asking for sugar. Thomas sent a 10-second clip of the final table decision. Just the call and the breath before the reveal. Comments multiplied like weeds in bright ditch water. Marcus watched once and closed the phone. A 10-second window into a 12-year-old's bravery was not the house. He did not want strangers in the kitchen. Gerald texted an invitation to a luncheon. Marcus declined and sent a donation receipt to the same cause, a cleaner sentence than a table photo. Christine mailed a card in tidy penmanship. The ink felt like regard rather than content. On a Saturday, Dorothy insisted on cooking, and Marcus surrendered to the music of her kitchen. Cabinet doors clicked. Oil whispered in a pan. A wooden spoon counted time against the side of a pot. She listened to Jamal describe a crab-like robot. She listened to Marcus explain why a driver needed a different route when rain pushed traffic sideways. She poured tea and warned them not to mistake excitement for chaos. At the door, she pressed a folded page into Marcus's palm, a community center flyer for tutoring. They need people who can show up on time, she said, not stars, people who come and keep coming. He went. The room smelled like rubber mats and pencils. 4 kids waited at a folding table with math worksheets and the watchful faces of people who have learned not to trust the calendar. Marcus began with names and stayed the whole hour. He returned the next week, then the next. He wrote the schedule on the whiteboard and treated it like a promise. When he told Jamal, the boy nodded like a man. I will come when time allows. The apology arrived not as a spectacle but as a calendar invite, a private ceremony. Dr. Morrison called it a framework that favored repair over theater. The location was the institute, not a mansion. No press, no streams, consent by paper before consent by presence. In the small auditorium, the air felt honest. The walls wore student posters about water quality and coding ethics. A few dozen people sat without program or assigned seats. Victoria stood at the front with a single sheet in hand and did not look down when she spoke. I do not want performance. I want clarity. I hurt 2 people who worked for me. I tried to turn their excellence into my entertainment. Humility arrived by force of evidence that was not mine. I am sorry. I am changing what I fund and how I speak. If forgiveness does not come, that is yours to keep. If it comes, let it arrive because I earn it and keep earning it. She stepped down without requesting applause. A quiet traveled the room like a low tide. Marcus stood because a confession deserves a witness who is upright. He did not absolve. He accepted the words as placed, then returned to his seat. In the lab afterward, made larger by new benches, paid for in redirected pride, Emily pushed a pawn forward and glanced at Jamal. He answered with a night and a grin, and taught her a line from an opening he had memorized at the kitchen table. The click of pieces against squares, sounded like a future taking a shape you could draw. The season turned and the sky lowered earlier. Marcus ran his last route beneath slate light and drove past a stop where a boy, his son's age, shifted a too-empty backpack from one shoulder to the other. He passed a billboard promising a luxury he no longer mistook for safety. He turned onto his street and saw the warm square of their living room window, a beacon scaled to a life. Jamal sat at the table with the spiral notebook open. He was mapping a lesson for the community center, resistors and batteries drawn in neat boxes, arrows pointing the way. The pencil moved and paused and moved again. Marcus set down his keys and leaned in the doorway to let the day settle. The apartment held the soft scent of sautéed onions and the cool mineral of the hallway. "Where should we put the microscope when it arrives?" Jamal asked without looking up. "The Institute will use it, but Dr. Morrison says I can borrow it if we keep records. Grandma says the kitchen is fine if we promise no acids." "The kitchen will do," Marcus said. Many truths start there. They ate late and cleaned slowly. He washed, and Jamal dried. The radio in the other room muttered a score and then fell back to the hum of the evening. On the bookcase, the trophy caught lamplight and gave it back without asking for more. Before bed, Marcus wrote a date on an envelope and slid a receipt inside. The paper rasped like a match that did not need fire. Habit as oath. He turned off the lamp and paused in the doorway to his son's room. Jamal slept on his side, the spiral notebook resting on the nightstand, the pencil aligned with the edge, as if precision had learned how to sleep. Beyond the thin glass, the city breathed. The future did not roar. It pulsed. He spoke the sentence he had carried through emergency rooms and parking lots and school gym, not as spell, but as a practice of hope. We keep the record clean, then a breath, then the truth that had become a home, justice signs in quiet ink. In the end, this story isn't just about poker or winning. It's about dignity, truth, and the quiet kind of courage that doesn't need applause. It reminds us that justice rarely arrives with fireworks. It comes in the stillness of people who choose integrity when no one is watching. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is refuse to play by rules that punish honesty. Marcus and Jamal learned that real gold fears no fire, that what's genuine will stand the test, no matter who tries to bend it. The world will always have rooms where power tries to rewrite the odds, but strength lives in those who keep the record clean, who protect what's right without losing their humanity. It's also a call to break the silence that keeps injustice comfortable. When we speak, even softly, we remind others that fairness still matters. And when we choose compassion over pride, patience over vengeance, we prove that character is not built in the spotlight, but in the quiet moments when no one is keeping score. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments. What parts spoke to you most? Have you ever had to stand your ground in a moment that tested your sense of fairness? Your reflections help this space grow. Don't forget to like the video if it touched you, and subscribe to stay close to more true, thought-provoking stories about courage, justice, and the heart's resilience. Until next time, take a deep breath, keep your record clean, and may peace find its way to you, one honest choice at a time.